They've chosen Dr. Evelyn Shaw as this year's recipient. The applause arrived before the sentence finished. It crashed against the walls of the biomedical conference hall like a wave, loud enough to bury the sound of my heartbeat. On the giant screen behind the stage, the title of the winning project appeared: Adaptive Immunotherapy Platform for Resistant Tumors. Every graph, every model, every line of methodology. I knew every flaw in those slides because I had written the originals. I remained seated, not because I accepted what had happened, because standing up now would only make me look exactly like the bitter loser everyone expected. Across the aisle, Evelyn turned toward me with carefully practiced surprise. "I'm speechless," she whispered loudly enough for nearby researchers to hear. Someone beside me sighed. "Poor Daniel." Another leaned closer. "Years of work, gone." I smiled. It confused them. Evelyn's smile disappeared for less than a second before returning brighter than before. That tiny hesitation was enough. She still couldn't tell whether I knew. The ceremony ended with cameras surrounding her. Reporters asked about sacrifice, innovation, leadership. She answered every question beautifully. "We worked together for years," she said. "Daniel helped during the early stages, but the breakthrough happened much later." A perfect lie. Not completely false. Just carefully edited. Exactly the kind that survived because nobody asked the right question. I picked up my messenger bag and walked toward the exit. "Daniel." Professor Marcus Bennett caught up with me before I reached the lobby. His gray suit looked older than he did. I expected. He stopped. Expected me to cause a scene? His silence answered for him. "You should challenge this." "I won't. You've spent 7 years building that platform." "I know. They're celebrating your work." "I know." His voice dropped. "If you stay silent, history will remember her." I looked through the glass entrance where photographers kept asking Evelyn to hold the Crystal Award higher. History. Interesting word. History often favored whoever spoke first. Truth usually arrived late. "I've already submitted my resignation." Marcus blinked. "You what?" "I won't be returning to the Institute tomorrow." His expression shifted from anger to confusion. "Daniel, what are you planning?" I adjusted the strap over my shoulder. "Nothing." He frowned. "I don't believe you." "You don't have to." I stepped into the rain before he could ask another question. The city looked blurred beneath heavy clouds. Rainwater rolled across the pavement, swallowing reflections of skyscrapers. My phone vibrated. Evelyn Shaw. I almost laughed. Perfect timing. I answered. "Daniel." Her cheerful voice carried the warmth of someone celebrating a promotion. "I've been looking everywhere. I was leaving. You disappeared without congratulating me. I figured everyone else had that covered." A short pause. Then softer. "I hope we're still friends." Friends. The word tasted strange. "You won." "I did. I resigned." Silence. Longer this time. "You resigned?" Effective immediately. "But why?" "Because there was no reason to remain inside a building where everyone had already decided whose story mattered. Instead I said, I've done everything I wanted there." "Daniel, you'll do well." She sounded almost frightened. "You're not angry?" "No." That answer unsettled her far more than shouting ever could. "I thought." "I know what you thought." Another silence. "I have another meeting," I said. "Congratulations." I ended the call. The rain continued falling. An hour later, I unlocked the door to my apartment. The place was almost empty. Most books had already been packed into plain cardboard boxes. Research notes were gone. Laboratory journals were gone. Even framed photographs had disappeared from the shelves. I had started packing 3 weeks ago, long before today's ceremony, long before Evelyn's public victory. A knock interrupted my thoughts. "Marcus." "Of course." He entered without waiting. "You planned this." I packed efficiently. "No." His eyes swept across the apartment. "You expected today." I poured 2 cups of coffee. "I expected possibilities." "You sound like you're talking about weather." "I've had enough surprises for one career." Marcus accepted the mug, but never drank. "I've reviewed the published data." "So have I." "There are inconsistencies." "I know." "Enough to trigger an investigation." "I know." His breathing slowed. "You already knew before today." I looked out the window. "I stopped correcting her 6 months ago." He stared. "What?" She became confident. Images returned uninvited. Late nights. Shared laboratories. Draft after draft. Every time she ignored a control group. Every time she skipped validation. Every time I quietly repaired the damage before submission. Until one evening. I simply stopped. Not to trap her. To discover whether she understood the science or merely relied on me. The answer revealed itself faster than I expected. Marcus whispered, "You let the mistakes remain. I stopped protecting them. You never warned anyone." I warned her. When, every day she ignored criticism. He sank into a chair. My God, I wasn't smiling. There was nothing enjoyable about watching years of trust dissolve into certainty. Trust broke quietly, almost politely. Marcus placed his untouched coffee on the table. You could still expose everything. With what? Your drafts. Your notes. I destroyed nothing. Then released them. I walked toward the largest moving box and opened it. Inside were neatly labeled binders. Research logs. Experiment schedules. Digital backup drives. Witness signatures. Everything. Marcus looked relieved. So you kept evidence. I keep records. Then why haven't you shown anyone? Because accusations without timing become excuses. He frowned. I don't understand. I closed the box again. The Institute already decided today's story. So, if I interrupt the celebration tonight, they'll think I'm a jealous colleague. And later they'll ask different questions. The room fell silent. Marcus finally drank his coffee. Cold. He didn't seem to notice. The next morning, the Institute's internal forum exploded with congratulatory messages. Evelyn's picture covered every page. Young Scientist of the Year. Future of Cancer Research. International Fellowship Favorite. I read every headline without emotion. Then I turned the screen off. My phone rang again. This time Human Resources. Dr. Hart. Speaking. We hoped you'd reconsider your resignation. I won't. The director would like a meeting. I'm unavailable. You haven't accepted another position yet. No. Then why leave now? I smiled faintly. Because staying would require pretending none of this happened. Instead, I answered. My decision is final. By noon, another visitor arrived. Not Marcus. The Institute director himself. Richard Coleman had built his reputation on recognizing talent, or attaching himself to it. He entered with expensive shoes and practiced concern. Daniel. Director. I heard you've become difficult to reach. I've been packing. He looked around. You really intend to leave? I already have. He sat without invitation. This situation is unfortunate. Which situation? Evelyn's award. I thought the Institute was proud. He ignored the remark. Some people believe you contributed more than publicly acknowledged. Some people? He folded his hands. If you release a statement praising her, unnecessary speculation will disappear. There it was. Not justice. Not truth. Public relations. You came here for that. The Institute's reputation matters. So does scientific integrity. It isn't wise to make emotional decisions. I laughed quietly. He seemed offended. Did I say something amusing? Very. Explain. You assumed I'm emotional. He narrowed his eyes. Are you not? No. I've just watched 7 years end. They ended months ago. His expression changed. What do you mean? The day people stopped caring who actually did the work. He stood. I hope you won't damage the Institute. I won't. You promise? I don't need to damage what's already unstable. For the first time during our conversation, he looked uncertain. That evening I received an email. Subject. Congratulations on your fellowship selection. I read it twice. Not because I doubted the words. Because they had arrived exactly when expected. The Helix International Medical Fellowship. One researcher chosen every year. Independent. Overseas. Funded for 5 years. The selection committee had spent months reviewing anonymous laboratory documentation instead of public reputation. No interviews. No popularity. Only evidence. I had accepted their confidential offer 2 weeks earlier. No one at the Institute knew. Not even Marcus. Especially not Evelyn. Another message appeared seconds later. This one from Evelyn. Dinner tonight? We should celebrate together. I don't want things to stay awkward between us. I stared at the screen. Then closed the laptop. No reply. Some conversations arrived too late. Near midnight, Marcus called again. His breathing sounded rushed. Daniel. What happened? The ethics office. My fingers stopped moving. What about them? They've requested copies of laboratory access records. I closed my eyes. Not from fear. Recognition. The first crack had appeared. Marcus continued. I don't think this is routine anymore. Outside my apartment, thunder rolled across the city. Inside, I looked at the sealed binder resting beside my packed suitcase. I still had no intention of chasing anyone. Some truths moved slowly. But once they started walking, they rarely stopped. The first rumor reached me before sunrise. Not through the Institute. Not through Marcus. Through a junior researcher who had once spent an entire summer calibrating microscopes beside me. His message contained only one sentence. They sealed Lab 3 this morning. I read it twice before locking my phone. Outside the apartment window, movers loaded the last of my boxes into a rented truck. My life was shrinking into labeled cartons while another life waited across an ocean. For the first time in years, I felt strangely light. Not happy, not victorious, simply lighter than yesterday. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Marcus entered without his usual greeting. His hair was damp from the rain, and his tie hung crooked, as if he had forgotten it halfway through putting it on. They've frozen Evelyn's research server. I continued taping a cardboard box. I assumed they would. You assumed. The committee doesn't seal laboratories over paperwork. They're auditing every experiment. The tape gun clicked sharply. Good. Marcus stared. I honestly don't know how you stay this calm. I've already mourned what was taken from me. He let out a tired laugh. I haven't. We drove to a small cafe across from the Institute. Neither of us ordered food. Through the rain-streaked windows, we watched employees gather in anxious little circles. Nobody looked toward the cameras anymore. Yesterday, they had celebrated. Today they whispered. Marcus lowered his voice. The investigation started because someone reported inconsistencies in image metadata. I stirred untouched coffee. I know. You know everything before it happens. No. You predicted this. I expected consequences. He leaned closer. Daniel, did you report her? The question hung between us. No. I believe you. You shouldn't believe anyone without evidence. You included. Especially me. Marcus rubbed his forehead. I've spent 30 years teaching scientists to trust data. And I forgot people can manipulate everything before the data reaches the page. Outside, an ambulance passed the Institute entrance. Its siren echoed briefly through the wet streets. The sound reminded me of nights spent inside the oncology ward collecting blood samples from volunteers who still joked despite chemotherapy. Those patients had trusted us, not because we wore white coats, because they believed every number we wrote could someday save someone. That trust had weight, far heavier than awards, far heavier than careers. When I returned home, another email waited. Confidential. Helix International Fellowship. The committee requested a private video conference. No explanation. Only a time. Only a secure link. Exactly 3 hours later, 6 faces appeared on my screen. Men and women from different countries. No introductions. No unnecessary politeness. An elderly professor adjusted his glasses. Dr. Hart. Good afternoon. We assume you've seen recent developments involving your former institution. I have. You haven't contacted us. No. Why? I answered honestly. Your decision was made months ago. Another member smiled slightly. You understood our confidentiality policy. I respected it. The chairman folded his hands. Several journalists contacted us today. I imagine they did. They're asking whether your fellowship relates to Dr. Shaw's project. It doesn't. It relates to yours. Silence settled over the meeting. One researcher opened a thick folder. We spent 11 months verifying laboratory records. Page after page appeared on the shared screen. Notebook scans, timestamps, independent replication reports. Every late night, every failed trial, every corrected equation. Someone had actually looked. Not at headlines. At evidence. The chairman spoke quietly. We selected you because your documentation was the most rigorous we've reviewed in years. For a moment I couldn't answer. Not because I wanted praise. Because someone had finally acknowledged the work instead of the performance surrounding it. We also expect increased public attention, he continued. Our recommendation? I waited. Remained silent. A faint smile reached my face. I've had practice. Several committee members laughed. The tension eased. Then the chairman's expression turned serious again. There is one more matter. He opened another document. Our legal department believes someone attempted to access your confidential fellowship file last week. My heartbeat slowed. Who? We're still investigating. A chill traveled through my spine. I had expected stolen research. I had not expected someone to chase the future I had already left for. That evening, my apartment buzzer rang repeatedly. Not once. Not twice. 5 times. I opened the door. Evelyn stood there. She looked immaculate as always. Except today. Her makeup couldn't completely hide the exhaustion beneath her eyes. "I've been calling. I noticed. You ignored me." "Yes." She looked past me. "So, you're really moving." "I am." She swallowed. "The investigation. I heard. It isn't what people think." I remained silent. Her shoulders stiffened. "Daniel." "Yes." "You believe I stole your work. I know what I contributed." "That's not an answer." "It doesn't need to be." She stepped inside without asking. The apartment echoed with emptiness. Packed boxes lined every wall. "You planned to leave before the award." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was already leaving." She laughed nervously. "You always answer like that." "Because it's true." She looked around until her eyes stopped on a sealed storage case labeled "Original Laboratory Journals." For one terrifying second, her breathing changed. "You kept everything?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "I keep records." "I thought." She stopped herself. "You thought what?" "Nothing." "No." I folded my arms. "You've come this far. Finish this sentence." She looked away. "I thought you'd thrown your notes out." The room became impossibly quiet. Even the rain outside seemed distant. "You thought wrong." She forced another smile. "You always were obsessive." "No. I mean organized. Words matter." She flinched. "So do intentions." For the first time since entering my apartment, she seemed genuinely uncomfortable. "I never wanted this to happen." "Which part?" "The investigation." "I believe you." Her eyes widened. "You do?" "I don't think anyone wants an investigation." She stepped closer. "Then help me." There it was. Not an apology. A request. "What do you need?" "You still know the raw validation process better than anyone." "I do." "If you explain the missing files." "There are missing files?" Her face drained of color. She had spoken too quickly. I mean, you just confirmed something investigators haven't announced." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands remained steady. "I didn't come here to argue." "Why did you come?" "I need you to tell them we always worked together." "We did. Publicly." "I've never denied that." "They think I worked alone." "You accepted an individual award." "I." She looked as though she wanted to say 100 different things. Instead, she whispered, "I was under pressure." "So was I." "You don't understand." "No. I had one chance." "So did I." She covered her face for a moment. When she lowered her hands, the confidence that had dazzled reporters only yesterday was gone. "You could end this." "No. You don't even know what I'm asking." "I do." "What?" "You want me to protect you." She couldn't deny it. "I protected our research for years." "I know. You never noticed because I never asked for credit." A painful silence followed. "I corrected your calculations." She looked down. "I repeated experiments after you left." Her fingers tightened. "I rewrote statistical models before submission." A tear escaped despite her obvious effort to remain composed. "I never humiliated you for mistakes." "I know." And one day, my voice remained calm. I stopped. She closed her eyes. "You knew?" "I hoped I was wrong." "You tested me." "I gave you room to stand without me." "I panicked." "You pretended." She nodded once. "Barely. I thought if I kept going." Her sentence dissolved into silence. "You thought success would arrive before consequences." She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. After she left, I stood alone in the apartment. Not satisfied. Only tired. My phone vibrated. "Marcus, you won't believe this." "I probably will." The ethics office found deleted laboratory files. I looked toward the sealed journals again. "Recovered. They're bringing in digital forensics specialists." And Marcus lowered his voice. "They've suspended Evelyn pending investigation." Outside, another storm gathered over the city. Inside, I carried the sealed journals to the front door. Not to deliver them. Not yet. Some truths needed no assistance. Once people finally began asking the right questions, the answers had a way of finding them. The suspension became public 48 hours later. Not through an official press conference. Through silence. The Institute removed Evelyn's profile from its homepage before sunrise. By noon, the photographs from the award ceremony had disappeared from every social media account they controlled. It was as though they hoped deleting images could erase memory. It never worked that way. Memory had a habit of surviving in people long after websites changed. My phone buzzed continuously. Journalists. Former colleagues. Unknown numbers. I answered none of them. Instead, I carried another box into the moving truck waiting downstairs. The driver glanced at the stack of labeled cartons. "Big move." Very. Leaving town. Leaving the country. He whistled softly. Fresh start. I smiled politely. Something like that. By afternoon, Marcus arrived carrying a thick envelope. He looked exhausted. They're officially requesting your laboratory notebooks. I accepted the envelope, but didn't open it immediately. Who signed the request? The ethics committee. Not the institute director? Marcus shook his head. No. Good. Why does that matter? Because one wants the truth. And the other? Wants the scandal to disappear. Marcus sighed. I used to think those were the same thing. They rarely are. He sat on the edge of a packed chair. Daniel, there's something else. His hesitation told me this mattered. The forensic team restored deleted emails. I remained silent. They're not releasing details. They won't. But, he looked directly into my eyes. They asked whether you ever received unusual requests to alter experimental results. The room felt strangely still. I did. Marcus leaned forward. You never reported them. No. Why? Because every request was withdrawn before it became official. He frowned. I don't understand. Neither did I. Until much later. Until patterns emerged. Until every small adjustment pointed toward the same destination. Recognition. Awards. Funding. A reputation built one edited graph at a time. The committee meeting occupied a plain conference room inside a government research office rather than the institute. That alone told me everything. This investigation had moved beyond internal politics. 3 investigators greeted me. No cameras. No reporters. Only files. The senior investigator spoke first. Dr. Hart, thank you for coming. I was asked. We understand. He slid a recorder across the table. This interview is voluntary. I'll answer truthfully. We expect nothing else. The first hour passed quietly. Dates. Experiments. Laboratory procedures. Access permissions. Everything supported by documents rather than memory. Then the questions changed. Did Dr. Shaw ever ask you to remove failed trials from your reports? Yes. Did you? No. What happened afterward? I repeated the experiments. Why? Because patients deserve accurate science. Pin stopped moving for a moment. The investigator looked at me carefully. How long did this continue? Several years. Why remain in the partnership? The answer surprised even me. Because I believed people could learn. And when did that belief change? The day mistakes became deliberate. Silence filled the room. The senior investigator slowly pushed another folder toward me. Inside lay printed emails. Not mine. Evelyn's. Some addressed to administrators. Some to grant officers. One to Director Coleman. The final message made my chest tighten. Daniel doesn't need public recognition. He prefers working behind the scenes. I'll handle presentations. I remembered writing the presentation she later delivered. Word for word. I closed the folder. I've seen enough. The investigator nodded. We thought you might. When I stepped outside, someone waited beside the building. Not a journalist. Not Marcus. A woman in her early 50s wearing a navy coat despite the warm afternoon. She introduced herself quietly. My name is Dr. Sophia Leong. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. One of the Helix Fellowship board members. We've never met in person. No. I happen to be nearby. I doubt that. A faint smile crossed her face. Fair. She gestured toward a nearby park. Would you walk with me? I agreed. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. Do you know why Helix values laboratory notebooks more than published papers? I have theories. I'd like to hear one. Because notebooks record uncertainty. She smiled. Exactly. We continued walking beneath rows of old maple trees. Published work shows success, she said. Notebooks show character. We stopped beside a quiet pond where ducks drifted across the still water. Dr. Leong looked toward the reflections instead of at me. You've been offered something beyond the fellowship. That caught my attention. I have. The board voted unanimously this morning. She handed me a sealed folder. Inside was another letter. This one far shorter. Invitation to join the International Scientific Integrity Council. I read it twice. This wasn't part of the fellowship. It wasn't. Why me? Because of what you didn't do. I looked up. She continued. You could have manufactured a public scandal. I considered nothing of the sort. You could have leaked documents. I didn't. You could have retaliated. I left. She nodded. Exactly. For the first time since the award ceremony, I felt something close to relief. Not because of the invitation. Because someone finally understood that restraint required as much strength as confrontation. That evening, the news cycle changed. Headlines no longer celebrated breakthroughs. They questioned them. Award-winning cancer study under formal review. Institute faces ethics investigation. Research records examined. My phone remained silent. Not because people had stopped talking, because they had stopped asking me for reactions. Now they wanted facts. Facts took time. Facts couldn't be rushed into headlines. Marcus called just after sunset. You should turn on the television. I'd rather not. This matters. I switched it on. Director Richard Coleman stood before a crowd of reporters. His expression carried the polished confidence of a man trying to outrun a storm. The Institute is fully cooperating with investigators. Questions flew from every direction. Did administrators ignore earlier concerns? Were internal warnings dismissed? Who approved the award nomination? Coleman's answers grew shorter. Then a reporter asked the one question he clearly hadn't expected. Is it true Dr. Daniel Hart resigned before the award ceremony? A flicker crossed his face. Barely visible, but unmistakable. Personnel matters remain confidential. Another voice followed immediately. Did Dr. Hart ever raise concerns regarding data integrity? Coleman adjusted his microphone. We cannot comment on individual employees. Marcus laughed quietly through the phone. He's cornered. No, he's struggling. There's a difference. What do you mean? Cornered people tell the truth. And struggling people, they keep choosing the wrong lie. Late that night, an encrypted email arrived from Helix. One attachment. No message. I opened it. A spreadsheet. Hundreds of login records. Most belonged to Institute staff. One line stood out. An unauthorized attempt to access my confidential fellowship application. Originating from an administrator's office. Not Evelyn's laboratory. The administration building. Director Coleman's department. I stared at the screen. For the first time, the picture became larger than a stolen research project. Someone hadn't merely wanted credit. Someone had wanted control over who received opportunities. Outside, thunder rolled across the city once more. Inside, I closed the laptop carefully. The investigation was no longer about one dishonest scientist. It had reached the people who had protected dishonesty. And those people had far more to lose. The official hearing took place 3 weeks later. Not inside the Institute. Not in a courtroom. But in the National Academy of Medical Sciences, where careers had been built and quietly buried for decades. No applause greeted anyone that morning. Only the rustle of documents. Only the weight of expectation. Outside the building, television vans lined both sides of the street. Inside, every seat in the public gallery was occupied. Researchers, graduate students, journalists, patients' advocacy groups. People weren't there for entertainment. They wanted to know whether they could still trust the science that might one day save their lives. I sat alone in the third row. No lawyer. No public relations advisor. Just a notebook resting on my lap. Marcus walked in a few minutes later. He glanced around before taking the seat beside me. You know they're all looking at you. I noticed. You don't seem nervous. I've already answered my questions. He exhaled slowly. I wish everyone else had. The hearing began precisely at 9. 3 committee members entered. No dramatic speeches. No ceremonial introductions. The chairwoman adjusted her microphone. This inquiry concerns scientific integrity, authorship, institutional oversight, and public accountability. Her voice remained calm. Today's purpose is not punishment. She paused. It is truth. For the first hour, technical experts explained laboratory procedures, metadata, digital signatures, research archives. The audience listened quietly. Then Evelyn was called. She walked toward the witness table wearing a dark suit that made her appear older than I remembered. Gone was the confidence from the award ceremony. Gone were the polished interviews. She looked tired. Not from one sleepless night. From weeks of carrying something too heavy to hide any longer. The chairwoman spoke gently. Dr. Shah, do you maintain that the published work accurately represents your independent contribution? A long silence followed. Every camera focused on her. She looked toward the gallery. Our eyes met for less than a second. Then she looked away. No. The room didn't erupt. It became even quieter. I contributed, she continued, her voice trembling. But, she closed her eyes. I presented work that depended far more on Dr. Hart than I admitted publicly. Pens stopped writing. Keyboards stopped clicking. No one wanted to miss a word. I told myself I'd correct the record later. A bitter smile crossed her face. But success kept arriving. She swallowed. And every success made the truth harder to tell. Questions followed one after another. Who prepared the statistical validation? Dr. Hart. Who repeated failed experiments? Mostly, Dr. Hart. Who designed the adaptive response model? She hesitated. I did not. The admission echoed louder than any shouted confession. Then came the question that changed everything. Did anyone encourage you to minimize Dr. Hart's role? Evelyn froze. The committee waited. No one interrupted. Finally, yes. Every head in the room lifted. Who? She closed both hands tightly. Director Richard Coleman. A murmur spread through the audience. The chairwoman struck the gavel once. Order. Evelyn's shoulders shook. He said the institute needed a single public face. She laughed once. A hollow sound. He said Daniel didn't care about recognition. Marcus slowly turned toward me. I didn't move. Because I remembered that email. Word for word. Director Coleman hadn't merely repeated Evelyn's assumption. He had shaped it. Coleman entered the witness area 40 minutes later. His posture remained straight. His expression remained controlled. But confidence has a different rhythm from arrogance. The latter disappears quickly when evidence arrives. He denied everything at first. I acted in the Institute's best interests. The committee chair asked another question. Did you instruct Dr. Shaw to present herself as the principal architect of the project? No. Another document appeared on the screen. An internal memo. Signed electronically. His signature. His authorization. His recommendation. A second document followed. Meeting notes. Then emails. Then security logs. Each piece alone looked ordinary. Together, they formed a pattern no explanation could erase. Coleman adjusted his tie for the first time that morning. I may have encouraged clearer messaging. The chairwoman looked directly at him. Clearer. He hesitated. Our donors respond better to recognizable leadership. So authorship became marketing? No. But recognition helps secure funding. The silence that followed carried more judgment than any accusation. Near the end of the hearing, I was called. The oath lasted less than a minute. Then the questions began. Dr. Hart. Yes. When did you first realize your contributions were being minimized? I don't know the exact day. Estimate. When correcting the record became less important to others than protecting reputations. Why didn't you immediately expose the situation? I answered without looking toward Evelyn or Coleman. Because truth supported by evidence survives longer than anger supported by emotion. Someone in the audience quietly lowered their camera. The committee member continued. You kept detailed notebooks. Yes. You preserved digital records. Yes. You resigned before the award ceremony. Yes. Why? I looked across the room. Not at the cameras. At the rows of young researchers sitting quietly in the back. I realized I was spending more energy protecting people than protecting the science. The room remained completely still. So I stopped. The chairwoman requested my notebooks. I carried the sealed archive to the evidence table. One by one, the security seals were examined. Dates verified. Witness signatures confirmed. Nothing had been altered. Nothing had been added. Everything existed exactly as it had years earlier. One investigator opened the earliest notebook. The first page contained a sentence written in my own handwriting. If these records are ever needed, I hope it means the patients were protected before my career was. The chairwoman read it aloud. No one spoke afterward. Not even the reporters. Because everyone understood. The notebooks had never been prepared for revenge. They had been prepared out of responsibility. When the hearing concluded, no dramatic verdict was announced. The committee simply stood. The investigation is complete. Formal disciplinary actions will be issued after legal review. Outside, reporters rushed toward every witness. Microphones surrounded Evelyn. Questions chased Coleman. Flashes lit the entrance. No one approached me at first. I slipped quietly down the academy steps. Marcus caught up moments later. They're looking for you. They'll find the report. They want a statement. I've already given one. You've said almost nothing. I looked toward the gray afternoon sky. Exactly. Behind us, another wave of reporters surged toward the entrance. Inside the academy, the truth had finally been recorded. Outside, the consequences had only just begun. The airplane lifted through a blanket of gray clouds, and for the first time in months, there was nothing left for me to wait for. No hearing, no interview, no accusation. Only distance. As the city disappeared beneath the wing, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't leaving because I had lost my life's work. I was leaving because I had finally stopped carrying everyone else's. The Helix Research Center stood on a quiet hillside overlooking the sea. There were no marble entrances, no banners celebrating famous scientists, only glass laboratories, old trees, and an almost unsettling silence. A woman wearing a white lab coat met me at reception. Dr. Hart. Yes, I'm Dr. Sofia Alvarez. She shook my hand firmly. Welcome. No speech followed. No ceremonial tour. She simply handed me an access card. Your laboratory is ready. I looked at the card. Only my name. No title. No hierarchy. No awards. Just my name. Somehow, that felt more meaningful than every plaque hanging in my former institute. The laboratory surprised me. Not because it was luxurious. Because it was empty. Fresh notebooks rested on every workstation. The computers contained no old files. No inherited projects. No unfinished politics. Only possibility. Sophia watched quietly. We intentionally cleared everything. I looked at her. So you can build without protecting someone else's reputation. I smiled. You already know my history. We read the investigation. She paused. We hired the scientist. Not the headline. Those 5 words settled somewhere deep inside me. For months, I had been introduced by what had happened to me. Here, I was simply expected to work. The following weeks developed an unfamiliar rhythm. Nobody interrupted experiments to prepare media presentations. Nobody demanded dramatic results before data existed. Every Friday, the entire department gathered around a large wooden table. Not to compete, to criticize each other's work. Openly, respectfully. One afternoon, a junior researcher nervously interrupted my presentation. I think your control group might introduce selection bias. The room became silent. I looked at the graph again. He was right. I nodded. Good catch. The meeting continued. No embarrassment. No bruised egos. Only better science. Walking back to my office afterward, I laughed quietly. In my old institute, that single correction would have been treated like an attack. Here, it was considered teamwork. 3 months passed. My project slowly took shape. Not faster. Better. One evening, Sophia knocked on my office door. You've been here 12 hours. I lost track of time. She placed 2 cups of coffee on the desk. We all do. She looked toward the growing stack of notebooks. You still document everything by hand. I trust paper. She smiled. So do I. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she asked, Can I ask something personal? You can. Do you ever think about going back? I considered the question carefully. I think about the people. The institute. No. The patients. She nodded slowly. I understand. No. I looked through the window toward the ocean. I finally do. That night, Marcus called. His voice sounded lighter than it had in months. I have news. I'm listening. The disciplinary rulings are official. I leaned back. Evelyn. Medical license suspended for 5 years. I closed my eyes. Not from satisfaction. From sadness. Marcus continued. She accepted responsibility. And Coleman. He resigned before dismissal. That sounds like him. Marcus laughed softly. The investigation also ordered sweeping reforms. What kind? Mandatory authorship audits. I smiled. Good. They're calling them the Hart Protocols. I froze. What? I thought you'd want to know. I looked at the notebook lying open on my desk. Years of quiet documentation had become policy. Winter arrived gently along the coast. The laboratory windows overlooked waves that crashed against dark cliffs every evening. I had grown accustomed to the sound. It reminded me that persistence was louder than force. The Hart Protocols spread faster than anyone expected. Universities adopted standardized authorship records. Research centers strengthened data verification. Graduate students received mandatory ethics training based on real investigation cases. Not my name. Not Evelyn's. Only the lessons. Exactly as it should be. One afternoon, Sophia entered my office carrying a newspaper. You've avoided these long enough. She placed it on my desk. The headline covered the entire front page. Former institute announces new era of transparency. Below it was a smaller article. The institute had publicly acknowledged my contributions. Not because they wanted to. Because the evidence had become impossible to ignore. I folded the newspaper closed. Aren't you going to frame it? No. Why? I don't need permission to know what I accomplished. She smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Several weeks later, I received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a legal notice. A real letter. The handwriting was immediately familiar. Evelyn. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were only 2 pages. No excuses. No attempts to rewrite history. She described long days attending ethics rehabilitation programs. She admitted that ambition had slowly replaced honesty until she could no longer distinguish one from the other. Near the end, one paragraph caught my attention. You stopped protecting me long before the investigation began. I thought you had abandoned me. Now I understand you were giving me one final chance to become the scientist I pretended to be. I failed that chance, not because you left, but because I refused to stand on my own. There was no request for forgiveness, only acknowledgement. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my desk drawer. Some apologies did not erase damage, but they could still mark the beginning of responsibility. Months later, the Helix Fellowship hosted its annual symposium. Young researchers filled the auditorium. Many looked nervous. Many looked exactly as I had years ago. The moderator introduced me briefly. No mention of scandal. No mention of betrayal. Only my work. When I stepped onto the stage, I looked across hundreds of hopeful faces. I won't begin by talking about success. The room became quiet. I want to talk about notebooks. A few students laughed softly. So much of science happens before discovery. I held up one of my worn laboratory journals. This book contains failed experiments, wrong assumptions, corrections, doubts, and questions. I turned a page filled with crossed-out calculations. This is what integrity looks like. No dramatic music. No applause. Just complete attention. And if one day someone receives credit you believe belongs to you. I paused. Protect the truth first. Recognition has a strange habit of arriving late. But when it arrives honestly, it stays. The audience stood together only after I finished speaking. Not because I had defeated anyone. Because they understood what had truly survived. Not my reputation. Not my career. My principles. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my desk drawer. Some apologies did not erase damage, but they could still mark the beginning of responsibility. Months later, the Helix Fellowship hosted its annual symposium. Young researchers filled the auditorium. Many looked nervous. Many looked exactly as I had years ago. The moderator introduced me briefly. No mention of scandal. No mention of betrayal. Only my work. When I stepped onto the stage, I looked across hundreds of hopeful faces. I won't begin by talking about success. The room became quiet. I want to talk about notebooks. A few students laughed softly. So much of science happens before discovery. I held up one of my worn laboratory journals. This book contains failed experiments, wrong assumptions, corrections, doubts, and questions. I turned a page filled with crossed-out calculations. This is what integrity looks like. No dramatic music. No applause. Just complete attention. And if one day someone receives credit you believe belongs to you. I paused. Protect the truth first. Recognition has a strange habit of arriving late. But when it arrives honestly, it stays. The audience stood together only after I finished speaking. Not because I had defeated anyone. Because they understood what had truly survived. Not my reputation. Not my career. My principles. Spring returned to the coast with quiet certainty. The cliffs outside the Helix Research Center turned green again, and the sea lost the harsh gray color it had worn through winter. My office had changed. The shelves were no longer empty. Fresh notebooks stood beside older ones, each filled with careful observations, failed hypotheses, revised calculations, and patient progress. None of them were perfect. That was precisely why they mattered. A knock sounded against the open door. Sophia stepped inside holding a thin folder. You have visitors. I wasn't expecting anyone. I know. She handed me the folder. The International Medical Ethics Forum. I opened it. 3 names. Marcus Bennett, Director of the National Academy, and Richard Coleman. I looked up. They invited him. They invited everyone directly involved. I closed the folder. Tomorrow, the forum occupied an old university auditorium overlooking the harbor. There were no television cameras inside. Attendance was limited to researchers, educators, and ethics officials. People who genuinely wanted answers, not headlines. Marcus greeted me with a warm smile. You look healthier. I sleep now. I can tell. He laughed. I almost forgot you knew how. We walked into the hall together. Rows of students filled the seats. Some recognized me. Most didn't. That felt strangely comforting. Science should outlive personalities. The discussion lasted most of the morning. Questions centered on documentation, responsibility, leadership. Then the moderator asked something unexpected. Dr. Hart. I looked up. If you could go back. The audience leaned forward. Would you expose everything immediately? Silence settled over the room. I thought about the question carefully. About every sleepless night, every corrected spreadsheet, every ignored warning, every patient whose blood samples rested inside forgotten laboratory freezers. Finally, I answered, no. Several people looked surprised. The moderator asked why. Because exposing people isn't the goal. I folded my hands. Protecting the work is. If I had chased revenge first, I might have neglected the evidence. And then the truth would have become just another argument. Pens moved quickly across notebooks throughout the audience. One student quietly nodded. During the afternoon break, I stepped outside onto a stone terrace overlooking the sea. Someone approached slowly. Richard Coleman. He looked older than I remembered. Not because of age, because certainty had left him. He stopped several feet away. I wasn't sure you'd speak to me. I wasn't sure either. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he removed a folded envelope from his coat. I wrote something. I don't need it. I know. He lowered the envelope. I spent months convincing myself I had protected the Institute. And I finally realized. He looked toward the ocean. I was protecting my position. His voice carried no arrogance, only exhaustion. I told myself one recognizable face would attract funding. You did. I believed recognition mattered more than fairness. It often does. He looked at me, confused. Until it doesn't. The wind carried silence between us. Finally, he asked the question he had probably rehearsed for months. Do you hate me? I answered without hesitation. No. His shoulders dropped. I don't. I simply no longer carry what belongs to you. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he seemed to understand. He nodded once, quietly, then walked away without another word. There was nothing else either of us needed to say. The final session ended just before sunset. As attendees slowly left the auditorium, a group of graduate students approached me. One of them held a worn laboratory notebook against his chest. Dr. Hart. Yes. I almost threw this away last year. He smiled awkwardly. It only contains failed experiments. I accepted the notebook carefully. The pages were filled with crossed-out ideas, coffee stains, and hurried handwriting. I returned it to him. Then it's one of the most valuable books you'll ever own. His friends laughed softly. He looked puzzled. I continued. Success teaches conclusions. Failure teaches judgment. Keep both. The young researcher smiled. I will. They thanked me before disappearing into the evening crowd. Several months later, Helix announced a new international initiative. Every participating laboratory would adopt transparent contribution records from the first day of every project. Not because regulations demanded it, because researchers themselves requested it. The proposal passed unanimously. No one called it the Hart Protocol this time. It no longer belonged to me. It belonged to everyone willing to protect the integrity of their work. That was enough. One quiet evening, after everyone had gone home, I remained alone in my office. The last rays of sunlight stretched across the desk. I unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside rested three things. The first laboratory notebook from 7 years earlier. The fellowship acceptance letter. Evelyn's handwritten apology. I looked at each one for a long time. Then I closed the drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, because I no longer needed to revisit the past to understand the present. Outside, waves continued breaking against the cliffs. Exactly as they had before my career collapsed. Exactly as they had after it began again. The sea had never cared about awards, or titles, or recognition. It simply endured. Perhaps that was why I found it so comforting. Years later, another international conference gathered scientists from around the world. This time, I sat quietly among the audience while a young researcher accepted the highest honor in cancer immunotherapy. During the acceptance speech, she smiled toward her team. This discovery belongs to everyone who carried it forward. One by one, she invited every contributor onto the stage. Technicians, graduate students, data analysts, senior researchers. No one stood alone beneath the spotlight. The audience rose in applause. I remained seated, smiling quietly. Not because anyone mentioned my name. They didn't. They didn't need to. The future I had hoped for was standing on that stage. Shared. Honest. Unafraid. As the applause echoed through the hall, I slipped my old notebook into my bag and walked toward the exit. Some victories never arrive with trophies. Some arrive when the world finally learns the lesson your silence protected all along.